If Bill Monroe is the father of bluegrass music, then surely Lester Flatt and Earl Scruggs are among his most prominent offspring. Flatt and Scruggs met in 1945 when they were both performers in Monroe's preeminent band, the Bluegrass Boys. The duo played with Monroe until 1948 when they left to form their own group, the Foggy Mountain Boys. Their band included fiddle player Paul Warren, a master player in both the old-time and bluegrass fiddling styles, whose technique reflected all aspects of the bluegrass breakdown. Dobro player Uncle Josh Graves, an innovator of the advanced playing style of the instrument, which has replaced the mandolin in some groups. The stand-up bass player was cousin Jake Tulloch, along with mandolinist Curly Seckler. They are considered by music historians as one of the premier bluegrass groups in the history of the genre. They went on to enjoy a 20-year reign as major contributors to bluegrass. Flatt's rhythm guitar style and vocals, aligned with Scruggs' three-finger banjo-picking style, gave them a distinctive sound that won them many fans. In 1955, they became members of the Grand Ole Opry.
I grew up in a musical family, and my lifelong dream was to get into music. And when I started, I wanted to go to the best that I thought, and this was it, the Grand Ole Opry.
Many of their songs were credited to Certain and Stacy. In actuality, these songs were written by Flatt and Scruggs and members of their band. Certain and Stacy were the maiden names of Flatt and Scruggs' wives, Louise Certain Scruggs and Gladys Stacy Flatt. Although fully involved in the bluegrass sound, Earl Scruggs had always tended towards a more progressive sound and had experimented on duets with saxophonist King Curtis and added songs by Bob Dylan to the group's act. Flatt, a traditionalist, didn't like these changes, and the group broke up in 1969. Both moved on and started new bands of their own. Lester Flatt founded the Nashville Grass, and Scruggs led the Earl Scruggs Revue. But more about that later. Let's go back to the very beginning. Lester Raymond Flatt was born in Duncan's Chapel, Tennessee, June 19, 1914. His parents were Nanny Mae Haney and Isaac Columbus Flatt. Earl Eugene Scruggs was born in the Flint Hill community of Cleveland County, North Carolina, January 6, 1924. His father, George Scruggs, was a farmer and bookkeeper who died when Earl was only 4 years old. After his death, Scruggs' mother, Georgia Lulu Rupp, was left to take care of the farm and 5 children, of which Earl was the youngest. Flatt and Scruggs both grew up in rural farm homes, immersed in rich musical traditions.
There was 9 of us in family, and we had a pretty good singing choir, you might say, at home, you know. And we would always gang around of a night and do a little singing before we went to bed. And we just more or less growed up in a musical family, you know. My dad and I had a sister that was a very good banjo picker, the drop thumb style, and that kind of made me mad because I couldn't pick that style, and that's why I quit. And I thought, well, I'll try the fiddle. And I made so much racket I couldn't stand that, so I had to give that up. And I was about 7, 8 years old when I started singing. I was in several singing contests that we used to have in the country, what we called all day singing and dinner on the ground, you know. And of course, I guess the dinner on the ground got me to go about as much as the singing did. But anyway, I was always in on it, and I won quite a few of those, you know. My daddy played the old-time fiddle and 5-string banjo. He played what they call the drop thumb. They have several different names for that. I call it the Grandpa Jones style anyway. But that's what I wanted to do, and I started out trying to do that, and they picked a 2-fingered style. I got to where I could do that real good. I thought it was good anyway, but maybe it wasn't. But anyway, I never could get that drop thumb style to work. My thumb to work like I'd sit and watch my dad for 30 minutes at a time, and that thumb was just working like I always said, like a chicken picking up corn. But my thumb wouldn't work like that, so I kind of gave it up and picked up the old guitar and went from there, and I've stuck to it ever since.
As young men, both Flatt and Scruggs worked in textile mills before becoming full-time musicians. Flatt, who left school at the age of 12 and married at 17, began his radio career in 1939 and worked in several bands, including that of Charlie Monroe, Bill's older brother, where he sang tenor, played guitar, and mandolin. In 1945, he was hired as guitarist and lead singer in Bill Monroe's Bluegrass Boys. Scruggs, who remained close to home through the war years to help his widowed mother, was recognized from an early age as a banjo prodigy. After his father's death, he took solace in playing music, and when not in school or doing chores on the farm, he spent all his time practicing. His first radio performance was at age 11 on a Talent Scout show. In the early 1930s, listening to Fisher Henley on the radio, Earl was exposed to banjos built by the Gibson Company of Kalamazoo, Michigan. Henley was known as the North Carolina State Banjo Champion and played 2 or 3 banjo numbers every week on his program. Earl recounted that the banjo numbers made the listening really worthwhile. Young Earl could not know that Fisher Henley was using a Gibson Mastertone banjo, the most expensive 5-string banjo offered by Gibson at that time. In an ironic twist of fate, it would be this very same banjo Scruggs would later own and use as his primary instrument during the bulk of his career. By the time he was a teen, he had developed his own distinctive banjo style that enabled him to play a broad variety of music with speed and clarity. In 1945, when Scruggs joined Flatt in the Bluegrass Boys, both became part of Bill Monroe's most influential lineup, along with fiddler Chubby Wise and bassist Cedric Rainwater, whose real name was Howard Watts. Flatt and Scruggs played a crucial role in the development of the sound that later came to be known as bluegrass. Scruggs used the banjo as a lead instrument, like a fiddle or a guitar, particularly on faster songs and instrumentals. Flatt perfected a roll, executed with the thumb and first 2 fingers of his right hand. Lester Flatt recalls the day he first met Earl Scruggs.
We went without a banjo picker for a long time, and I was really enjoying the picking without it because, you know, it wasn't nothing holding us back. We was doing what we wanted to do. And Bill come to me at the Opry one night, and he said, "There's a fellow here wants to try out for the banjo picking. Fellow by the name of Earl Scruggs." I said, "Well, as far as I'm concerned, he can leave it in the case." But I changed my mind after I heard him pick.
Despite Bill Monroe's pleading, Flatt and Scruggs left the Bluegrass Boys in early 1948. Monroe thought Flatt and Scruggs had a secret understanding, but both men denied it. Monroe did not speak to either one of them for 20 years thereafter, a feud well known in country music circles. By spring of that year, Flatt and Scruggs had formed their own band, the Foggy Mountain Boys. By the end of the year, they were playing at WCYB in Bristol, Tennessee, and recording for Mercury Records. In the spring of 1949, their second Mercury recording yielded the classic Foggy Mountain Breakdown. While with the Bluegrass Boys, Scruggs had performed a similar song called Bluegrass Breakdown with Bill Monroe, but Monroe had denied him songwriting credits for it. Later, Scruggs changed the song, adding a minor chord, thus creating Foggy Mountain Breakdown. The song contained a musical oddity. Flatt played an E major chord against Scruggs' E minor. When asked about the dissonance years later, Scruggs said he had tried to get Flatt to consistently play a minor there, to no avail. He said he eventually became used to the sound and even fond of it. The song won a Grammy and became an anthem for many banjo players to attempt to master. In 1950, they signed with Columbia Records, the label they would be with for the rest of their career together. In 1953, Martha White Flower began sponsoring Flatt and Scruggs' daily early morning radio show over WSM Nashville, and continued to support them for the rest of their career. Their Martha White theme became synonymous with their performances and was often requested at live concerts.
We're at Carnegie Hall, and of course the critics up there, they had a lot of write-ups that the Hicks from the Sticks was coming to town, said they wanted to give them a chance to get out of town, but there was a hall full that didn't get out, you know. We had them standing all over the place, and we did a live album there for Columbia Records. I didn't think anybody up there had ever heard about Martha White. We've been with Martha White for about 23 years, but we got into this album, and all over the auditorium they was hollering, Martha White, Martha White. Well, I thought we'd better go ahead and do it because the old saying they was running their album, you know. But I didn't think about Columbia letting the song go in the album because they won't hardly let a commercial song go, but they did. They let it go in the album. And about a month or so after the album was released, we made a tour over in Japan and China. We opened our show in Tokyo, and I believe the funniest sound I ever heard in my life was he's on the stage and those Japanese people hollering, "Oh, more what? Oh, more what?" Did somebody say Martha White? Let's see if we can. Now you big blind, Martha White. Yes, man. Goodness gracious, good line, Martha White. Oh, the finest biscuits ever was. Get Martha White, say fries and flour. The one all-purpose flour. Martha White, say fries and flour with hot fries and flour. It certainly helped us, you know, because we was about the only ones here at the Grand Ole Opry that had a full-time sponsor like that. For the finest biscuits ever was, get Martha White, say fries and flour, one all-purpose flour. Martha White, say fries and flour with hot fries plus.
In 1955, Louise Scruggs, Earl's wife, took over the duties as manager for the duo. She was a true trendsetter, as she modeled the role of professional management for the music industry. She managed bookings, publicity, publishing, and recording contracts throughout Earl's long and successful career. During the late 50s and early 60s, their syndicated television show was seen by millions of viewers in the Southeast. Their music started breaking into the country charts with gospel songs like Cabin on the Hill.
There's a happy child at home. There's a happy child at home. In the memory I can see. Yes, in the memory I can see. Standing out upon the hill. Standing out upon the hill. Neath the shadow of the tree. Neath the shadow of the tree. If I only had my way. If I only had my way. Give my heart a thrill. It would give my heart a thrill. Just to simply wander back. Just to simply wander back. To the cabin on the hill. To the cabin on the hill. Oh, I want to wander back. Oh, I want to wander back. To the cabin on the hill. To the cabin on the hill. Neath the shadow of the tree. Neath the shadow of the tree. I would like to linger still. I would like to linger still. Just to be with those I love. Just to be with those I love. Sure my heart will overflow. Sure my heart will overflow. And I want to wander back. And I want to wander back. To the cabin on the hill. To the cabin on the hill. But the saddest of it all. But the saddest about how much I yearn. I don't know how much I yearn. If I only had my way, if I only had my way, it would give my heart a thrill. It would give my heart a thrill. Just to simply wander back. Just to simply wander back to the cabin on the hill. To the cabin on the hill. Oh, I want to wander back. Oh, I want to wander back to the cabin on the hill. To the cabin on the hill. Neath the shadow of the tree. Neath the shadow of the tree. I would like to linger still. I would like to linger still. Just to be with those I love. Just to be with those I love. Sure my heart will overfeel. Sure my heart will overfeel. And I want to wander back. And I want to wander back to the cabin on the hill. To the cabin on the hill. Thank you, fellas. Thank you very much. Neighbors, we hope you enjoyed that one. Cabin on the Hill.
Young listeners found great interest in their banjo-sparked acoustic sound at folk festivals around the country, and appearances at the Newport Folk Festival and on national TV brought them widespread acclaim. New York Times music critic Robert Shelton even compared Scruggs to master violinist Niccolò Paganini. This led to a series of folk-oriented albums. At an appearance in the Hollywood folk club The Ash Grove, the group caught the ear of the producer of the Beverly Hillbillies and led to the Ballad of Jed Clampett, their only single to reach #1 on the country charts.
About the highlight, I guess, was working with the Beverly Hillbillies, you know. They, I think they did more for our show and for our kind of music than anybody else. I'd have to give them credit for it. I listened to my story about a man named Jed. Poor mountaineer barely kept his family fed. Then one day he was shooting at some food. Up through the ground come a bubbling crew. Oh, that is black gold, Texas tea. I like to think of it as being a forerunner in country music, because there ain't no way you can take country away from a fiddle and a 5-string banjo. Well, the first thing you know, old Jed's a millionaire. Ken folks said, Jed, move away from there. Said California is the place you ought to be. So they loaded up the truck and they moved to Beverly Hills, that is. Swimming pool, movie stuff. Now it's time to say goodbye to Jed and all his men. They would like to thank you folks for kindly dropping in. Won't invite you back again to this locality to have a heap and happen on the hospitality. Beverly Hillbillies, that's what they call them now. Nice folks. Y'all come back, yeah?
Flatt and Scruggs appeared in several episodes as family friends of the fictional Clampetts. In their first appearance, they portray themselves in the show and perform both the theme song and Pearl, Pearl, Pearl. That song went to number 8 on the country chart in 1963. Scruggs published an instructional book entitled Earl Scruggs and the 5-String Banjo in 1968. It received a Gold Book Award from the publisher when it sold over 1 million copies. Over their 20-year association, Flatt and Scruggs recorded over 50 albums and 75 single records, and featured over 20 different musicians as Foggy Mountain Boys, sidemen backing the duo. The group reached its zenith of popularity in the mid-60s. Highlights included their sensational appearances in Japan, an appearance at San Francisco's Avalon Ballroom during the peak of its hippie years, and another soundtrack success when their 1949 recording of Foggy Mountain Breakdown was used in the 1967 film Bonnie and Clyde. Scruggs had received a phone call from the film's producer and star, Warren Beatty, first asking Scruggs to write a song for the movie. Soon, Beatty called back, saying that he wanted to use the existing vintage Mercury recording of Foggy Mountain Breakdown, and rejected the argument that it was recorded 18 years prior at a radio station with no modern enhancements. The film was a hit, called by the Los Angeles Times a landmark film that helped usher in a new era in American filmmaking. In 2005, the song was selected for the Library of Congress's National Recording Registry of Works of Unusual Merit. Many very young future country stars found their way onto the stage with Flatt and Scruggs, including Ricky Skaggs and Marty Stewart.
What do you want, son?
I want a pig.
You want a pig? Early. He's drawing back here with his mantle and says he wants to pig.
Put him on.
Put him on? Take him right over to that mic. It's just down to just about his size. What are you going to pig?
Foggy Mountain Station.
Foggy Mountain Station. Let's hear it.
I used to watch their television shows, and I would think someday, well, I wish I could be one of their kids and, take that banjo case or take that guitar case to the bus for them. I was crazy that way. I started to work with Lester Flatt when I was 13. I left home, I was cutting yards one day, and the next day I was in his band. It was like joining the Navy. It never hit me. Until about 20 years later, one of my drummer brought his kid out on the bus, Travis, with pimples and voice changing. I said, Travis, how old are you? He said, 13. And I saw myself sitting there, and it almost made me sick. I thought, man, that was you, and you didn't have any sense to know any better, God took care of me.
When they hear the dinner bell from the Shady Rest Hotel at the Jungle.
The duo ended their partnership in 1969. Flatt did not support the more progressive sounds that Scruggs was pursuing, and the split became irreconcilable. In early 1969, Scruggs formed the Earl Scruggs Revue, consisting of two of his sons, Randy on guitar and Gary on bass, and later Vassar Clements on fiddle, Josh Graves, dobro, and Scruggs' youngest son Steve on drums. On November 15, 1969, Scruggs performed live with the newly formed group on an open-air stage in Washington, D.C. at the Moratorium to End the War in Vietnam. Scruggs was one of the few bluegrass or country artists to give support to the anti-war movement. The Earl Scruggs Revue gained popularity on college campuses, live shows, and festivals, and appeared on the bill with acts like Steppenwolf, the Byrds, and James Taylor. Earl, always the experimenter, spent time exploring creating a musical connection with a variety of artists, including Bob Dylan and a very young Joan Baez. The Earl Scruggs Revue recorded for Columbia Records and made frequent network television appearances throughout the 1970s. Their album, I Saw the Light with Some Help from My Friends, featured Linda Ronstadt, Arlo Guthrie, Tracy Nelson, and the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band. This collaboration sparked enthusiasm by the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band to make the album Will the Circle Be Unbroken?
For a young group like that, to gather up those people, Doc Watson and Mama Maybelle Carter and Merle Travis, people like that, it would make a tremendous album. I think they thought I was kidding to start with, but I thought it was a good idea. At that time, the Dirt Band had long hair and whiskers, and Acuff made a remark sometime later that he always liked to see a man's face when he talked to them.
Earl and Louise Scruggs made phone calls to eminent country stars like Roy Acuff and Mother Maybelle Carter to get them to participate in this project, to bring a unique combination of older players together with a new generation of performers. Scruggs ended his touring career in 1980 because of back problems. Earlier, he had survived a near-fatal auto accident and a solo plane crash, both of which left him ongoing health issues. Scruggs remained active musically and released The Storyteller and the Benjamin with Tom T. Hall in 1982 and a compilation album, Top of the World, in 1983. In 1994, Scruggs teamed with Randy Scruggs and Doc Watson to contribute the song Keep on the Sunny Side to the AIDS benefit album Red Hot Country. In 2001, after 17 years without releasing an album, Earl Scruggs and Friends was released, featuring Elton John, Sting, Don Henley, Johnny Cash, Dwight Yoakam, Billy Bob Thornton, and Steve Martin. At Scruggs' 80th birthday party in 2004, Porter Wagoner said, "Earl is to the five-string banjo what Babe Ruth was to baseball. He is the best there ever was and the best there ever will be." In 1969, Lester Flatt formed a more traditional bluegrass group, the Nashville Grass, with Curly Seckler. Over the years, as with most bluegrass bands, the Nashville Grass saw numerous changes in personnel, including the addition of contemporary country music star Marty Stewart, who started with Flatt at the age of 13. Lester Flatt continued to record and perform with the Nashville Grass until 1979. At that time, Curly Seckler became leader of the band.
Just a closer walk with me.
After the breakup in 1969, Flatt and Scruggs did not speak to each other for the next 10 years. In 1979, Scruggs made a surprise visit to the hospital bedside of Flatt. They talked for more than an hour, and even though Flatt's voice was barely a whisper, he spoke of a reunion concert. Scruggs answered yes, but told Flatt they would talk when he was better. Flatt told friends the visit came as a bit of a surprise and made him feel good. However, Lester Flatt never recovered and died on May the 11th, 1979.
Well, I'd like to be remembered as one that tried to fight it to the end. One of the greats, you know what you'd like, whether I am or not, but that's what I'd like for it to be.
Earl Eugene Scruggs died from natural causes at 88 on the morning of March 28, 2012 in a Nashville hospital. His funeral was held that Sunday at the Ryman Auditorium in Nashville and was open to the public. He was buried at Spring Hill Cemetery in a private service. Lester Flatt and Earl Scruggs, as a duo, were inducted into the Country Music Hall of Fame in 1985. Both were among the inaugural members of the Bluegrass Music Hall of Fame in 1991. Lester was inducted posthumously, but Earl was alive to accept the honors. Lester's hometown of Sparta, Tennessee, held a bluegrass festival in his honor for a number of years. Lester Flatt Memorial Bluegrass Day remains part of the annual Liberty Square celebration held in Sparta. Flatt and Scruggs were ranked number 24 on CMT's 40 Greatest Men of Country Music in 2003. Flatt and Scruggs made an enduring contribution to the history of bluegrass, beginning with their work with Bill Monroe, through their time together with the Foggy Mountain Boys, and after they went their separate ways. Their unique playing styles and driving rhythms exposed generations of young people to the genre and established a standard for future bluegrass and country musicians.
I'm on my pathway leading to heaven. When angels carry me home, I see Jesus waiting for me in heaven. When angels carry me home, when angels carry me home, when angels carry me home. I want to see Jesus first of